Today's episode is brought to you by the ROI Shop. The ROI Shop delivers interactive value selling calculators that enable salespeople to collaborate with their prospects and build the financial business case like never before. And as always, the book Conversations, How to Manage Your Business Relationships One Conversation at a Time by yours truly, Ivan Farber. Conversations is available on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations About Conversations. This show helps people be more effective in their conversations, their business relationships, and the projects and endeavors that they lead. Our goal, quite simply, is to make the business world a better place, one conversation at a time. Today's episode is for salespeople. It's about closing more business. So if you want to learn how to close more business more predictably and more effectively, this conversation is for you. Our guest is Michael Farber. He's the founder of the ROI Shop, a company that helps salespeople articulate their value in dollars and cents. He spent more than 16 years in enterprise software and technology sales before founding his company. His approach is pragmatic and impactful, and his videos, you should check out his videos. His videos are creative and funny. Please help me welcome to Conversations About Conversations, Michael Farber.
Hey, Ivan. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here today.
It's exciting to have Farber power. We have the same last name, and as far as we know, we're not related.
That's true, but we're going to do some digging around because as we talked prior to getting live here, there might be some connections that happened way back in the old days. So we're gonna try to find something out here.
Yes. Well, Michael, I have 4 main topics in mind for our conversation. And the first one is to talk about value selling in general. The second is to articulate and quantify your value to your buyers. The third is to reduce the outcome that is most prolific for salespeople, and that is the no decision outcome. And then the fourth topic, overcoming objections. That's what I have in mind. I welcome you. I've done almost all the talking so far. I'd like to give you the opportunity to make an opening statement.
Yeah. Once again, the name's Michael Farber. You know, I started the ROI Shop, like you said, Ivan, after 16 plus years of selling software, and I really got tired of getting my butt kicked by the no decision outcome. And that's what happens to most salespeople. You work so hard to generate leads, give presentations, give demonstrations, follow, the selling process, and then ultimately get ghosted and nothing happens. And you got to have a lot of thick skin, but eventually it still gets to you. You still get tired of losing, getting tired of ghosting. I mean, you're human after all. So what I set out to do is build an interactive ROI tool for salespeople to use that's easy to use and easy to understand, because I think ROI has been done so poorly for so long. That's why reps rarely even use it and companies barely provide it to them.
We should define ROI as return on investment for those who may not have heard that acronym before.
In my videos, in my talk track, you'll notice I talk about value calculators. I even try to stay away from ROI tools because if you've ever used one in the past, you get this pit in the stomach and you envision this Excel spreadsheet with, rows across the top and tabs across the bottom and tables that you have no idea what it means. It doesn't give you a very good feeling, but value calculators and ROI tools are the same.
Now, your value calculator boils things down. Why don't you tell me and your audience how people use the value calculator?
So it's really for salespeople to use during the sales process. Now, we have a methodology on where and how to do it, but it could be different based on what you're selling and how long your sales process is and things like that. But it allows you to sit down with the prospect and build out what their current environment is costing them, their current state, their pains, how long does it take to go through a process? How many hours is wasted on it? What's that equate to labor savings? And then if you implement the proposed solution, what could that do? Can that save 90% of your time? Here's how many hours that equates to. And it shows them the future state. And if the pain is there, if that current state and future state is large enough, you really have a good opportunity there. But more importantly, you're arming your champion to sell internally, because nowadays it's harder and harder to sell. Decisions are being made 2 and 3 levels up, and you really need to arm your champion with more than just a demo these days. You have to give them a solid business case so they can get those decision makers' ears, because they only care about how it impacts the bottom line. So it's really important to go through the exercise to quantify your value and not just rely on features and functions.
When you don't quantify your value, what is the predictable outcome?
60 to 80% of all opportunities will end in a no decision, at least in the software SaaS space is where I've spent, my entire life selling. Companies are scrutinizing every dollar going out the door, and they see a lot of solutions as nice to haves. And if you want to get past that nice to have, you better show the financial impact of solving the problem.
I've heard you say consistently on your videos that people buy or companies buy for one of two reasons: to make money or to save money. And that what you've been doing, I think both in terms of the product that you provide, but also the counseling and the consulting that you do, is allow them to shift their conversations from talking, and again, I'm using your words, from feature and functionality to the actual financials and dollars and cents. How did you get to that point that you were doing it that way?
When I was selling for Concur Technologies, this was before I started the ROI Shop, a prospect forced me to use a calculator. Big company, Bacardi USA. The controller I was working with said, "Mike, we really want to move forward with your solution, but we're going to need a business case." And I remember Concur rolled out an ROI tool, a few months earlier, but nobody ever saved it. It took me time to find it. So I went down to Miami where Bacardi was located. I muddled through this calculator with Warren, the controller over there. And after we got done with it, he goes, "Mike, I got to tell you, this is one of the better tools that I've seen." So I'm no schmuck. I thought maybe I have a competitive advantage here, Ivan. So I started to utilize it in each and every deal going forward. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't a numbers guy. I actually did horrible in math through high school and in college. But within 4 times of using it, it completely changed the way I sold. I knew who was kicking tires, who wasn't, who was going to buy, why were they going to buy, if I had a strong champion within the account. And it just changed the way I sold. And then it got me thinking that there's just a huge void in the marketplace.
Another thing I've heard you talk about is not leaving your buyer with the responsibility for justifying the value. Why is that?
It's a no-win situation for them. Absolutely. When I started the ROI Shop, I thought, all right, I know this is where I grew up. I know the technology space. I'll pitch my idea to CEOs or CROs. They'll say yes. We'll get on a call. They'll explain to me, or they'll have an Excel spreadsheet, with their value, and I'll rebuild it. That was a big mistake. I had no idea how much education had to go along with it. And what I was most surprised about is when I signed a deal with a customer and I'd sit down with the CRO and I'm like, all right, explain to me your value, how they struggled, how leadership who lives, breathes, and eat their solution 24/7 could barely articulate their value to me. How could then the salespeople articulate their value? And then, they're in their solution all the time, they're demoing it, but now you're leaving it up to your champion who may have spent 2 hours with you. And let's face it, they were probably multitasking half the time. Now you're leaving it up to them to articulate your value to their stakeholders. It is an impossible ask. If the CEO or CRO can't explain it, how can you expect your champion to? And that's why so many deals end in a no decision, is because you're setting them up to fail.
They got your enthusiasm. They got excited by you making the presentation. And then they go and turn to their colleagues to figure out, okay, do we want to buy this? And then they can't justify it because they can't articulate it as clearly as you. But, and this is where your technology comes in handy so much, is that you've given them something that they can take right and put it in bottom line cents and dollars.
Exactly. I mean, to put it in your terms, you're giving them something to have the conversation those C-levels need to hear.
Right.
They don't care about a green button in the top right-hand corner. You could explain, oh, it's going to help really streamline things, but they want to know by how much, what's it going to impact, those types of things. And 90% of salespeople don't provide that to their prospects.
Well, I got this from your website, but I think it makes a good point and a good question. So on your website, you outline how most sales cycles play out. And this will resonate to the salespeople that are listening to this podcast. Number one, salesperson gets the lead, either self-generated or some other method. They perform what's a standard discovery to uncover the prospect's pains. Then they rush out to give a demo to show the features that address those pains. Then they give pricing. Then the prospect goes silent. And like you said, 60, 80% of the time, the salesperson says, I've been ghosted. What's going on here? And so you really stand for a very different approach. And I'm really getting a sense of that. I got a sense of that after watching the 75 videos they have on YouTube, because they're all interesting. They're all captivating. I encourage everybody to visit your website, theroishop.com, to check out your YouTube channel. I realize that most of what you do is on LinkedIn, where you have 17,000 followers who I'm sure appreciate your humor as I do. When you follow your process, what is then different than the standard process, the way it normally plays out?
So yeah, you nailed it. It's pretty standard across the board. You do your discovery, then you give your demo, and then pricing and ghosting, like you said. We'd work with companies to figure out where the best place is to insert the calculator, but the best place really is to figure out where you're getting ghosted. Because what that means is that prospect has not seen enough value to have one more conversation with you. They'd rather avoid your emails and your phone calls because you haven't provided them anything or encouraged, to have another conversation. So once you identified where that is, and most of the time it's after the demo, then that's where you insert the value calculator. And I don't mean after the demo, then set up another call, because you're still going to get ghosted a lot of the times. Make it part of that demo time slot. So if your standard demo is 45 minutes, make it an hour. If it's an hour, make it an hour and 15. You end that demo at that 45-minute mark. You open up the value calculator right there, and you build out one section of the ROI. So many people think when you think about ROIs, we got to build it all out at once. That's not the case. You could break it up into smaller digestible chunks. But based on discovery, you might say, Ivan, we got 15 minutes left. During discovery, you said automating your invoices and the time it takes was one of the big reasons you're looking at us. Hopefully you saw the functionality that showed you how we can do it. Let's show you the financial impact it could have on your accounting department. Open up the calculator right there on the screen. Ask them some basic numbers. By the way, you might have already asked them those numbers during discovery, so that section might be halfway filled out already. You plug in the numbers there. You show them the hours saved and what that might mean in labor benefit. And now they leave the meeting not thinking about features and functionality, but about the impact it can have. But what we also want to do is you build out one section during that call, then right there say, Ivan, do you mind if we set up a call over the next week to build out these other 3 areas you identified? And you get them to buy in, and now you have a guaranteed next step after the demo, where most reps don't. It's after the demo, fingers crossed. I hope Ivan says, can't live without it, Mike, send over the contract, but that's fairy tale land.
The term ghosting, I understand what that means. I think most people do, right? Like the person just disappears. They start ignoring your messages and your emails. Salesmen are often hopeful that, oh, they're just busy. I know they're busy. But what I'm curious about, with you having sold for so long, is how do you confirm that the person has ghosted you and no longer wants to talk with you? What is your process then?
I don't chase them. I mean, if I've gone through my process, which I do, and I
Okay.
built an ROI and then I'm getting ghosted, I'll follow up once or twice. I'll send them one email that really seems to work for me. It's called That Sales Guy, and it goes something like this: Ivan, hey, Mike Farber here. It's been several weeks since we spoke. Usually when I don't hear back, it means you've had other priorities, you selected another vendor, or it's just not a priority anymore. If that's the case, let me know so I'm not that sales guy who hounds you. That usually gets some kind of response. But then I just let them go. I don't chase people who don't want the solution anymore. There's bigger fish in the pond that I can go after. And I always put myself in my buyer's shoes. How would I act if I didn't want to buy a solution, or how would I act if I wanted to buy a solution? And that's about it. I mean, I know when I want something, I'm going to respond back. I'm going to ask more questions. It's that simple, but we sometimes get caught up in, oh yeah, maybe they are too busy. They're not. They're ghosting you. It is what it is.
It reminds me of the movie The Field of Dreams and the line, if you build it, they will come. And literally in that movie, it's ghosts that come to this field of dreams.
Yeah.
But I think your approach is good. You create value, you demonstrate value. I also have observed in the coaching that I've done is that most sales representatives, account managers, relationship managers are very quick to point out features, but do not always connect features to benefits.
Yes.
Also, people are feature focused and what we can do versus turning it around and finding out what their prospect or their client's needs are and being needs focused. So I write about this in my book and help people connect features to benefits, but also talk about the needs, but then the needs underneath the needs, and then the needs underneath the needs underneath the needs, all the way down to thinking about it, about the basic human needs that people have. I'm a big proponent of Abraham Maslow and the pyramid of needs and moving my prospects, clients, colleagues up the pyramid to self-actualization. What I like about your approach is very specific. Hey, you can make more money or save money. And I just find that there really is a space for changing the conversation from features to benefits and needs-based selling. Is that something you feel as well?
Yeah, I mean, the conversations are so different when you start going through it and asking business questions, not showing up and throwing up about how great your solution is, but when you really start and ask them about certain processes and how long it takes and what does it mean, and if I can give you back 500 hours, what would your team be able to do with it? And then they get to the things that, strategic initiatives that they can't get to, or they don't have the budget to get temp work, and now they're burnt out, and people are quitting, and now other people have to cover it. And they don't tell you that on a standard discovery call when you're peppering them with questions and it's a one-sided conversation. When you build something collaboratively on screen and they see when they plug in that number, that calculates, and what that calculates, and that goes, it's almost like you're building, they get excited to see what this outcome is going to be like. And, during that process, you could pause and ask questions, and it's just a different conversation, that you're having. And you really know if this is a company that is struggling, that will buy your solution, or you'll know it's not that bad for these guys. I don't expect to maybe win this deal.
Well, it's a collaborative approach,
Yes.
Which is another thing I advocate. It's a consultative approach. So you're on the same side of the table as a consultant. And what I hear also in what you're saying is you're painting a picture of a future with either more money made, less money spent. And then you said something a minute ago that just rang just right to my core of giving me an extra 500 hours. If you could give that to people, I think in many cases, that's more important to people than money, is getting more time. Of course, it's getting more time so that you can do business building activities to make more money. But I think we'd all like to make more money in less time and save more money and make more money. All of these things that really, you are really helping people with a compelling future.
Yeah, that's what we hope. You go to so many websites and the most reps throw out there is something they get from marketing. We could 3x revenue. We all increase productivity by 60%, but what the hell does that even mean? Productive where, or how are you going to do it? And that's the most ROI figures that a rep will throw out during a call. And that's not going to fly with a CFO or a CRO or whoever you're selling with.
I want to throw something out here that comes from my book about objections and overcoming objections. I feel like most people misunderstand what objections are, and even just spelling out what I call the 5 generic objections can be very helpful to people. So given your orientation to what you do and what your business does, I wanted to throw this out to you and get your feedback. But I have an acronym for the 5 generic objections that we get. Could there be more than 5? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know that I've captured everything, but I think these 5 capture the great majority. The acronym is DIMES. DIMES. And it stands for drawbacks, indifference, misunderstandings, excuses, and skepticism. I'm going to define each of those for you and also for my audience. So a drawback is when your client or prospect is dissatisfied with the absence or presence of some kind of feature. So you don't have the feature, they wish you had the feature, and the way you deal with a drawback is to focus on the bigger picture, to focus on already agreed upon benefits. Indifference. Indifference is the no outcome decision. Your client or prospect is satisfied with the status quo, or at least there's not enough motivation to overcome the inertia of the status quo. A misunderstanding is when your client or prospect thinks that you can't, don't, or won't offer a feature that they desire. Excuses, well, your client or prospect provides reasons or explanations to defend, delay, and I think the key here is avoid saying no. I think people would much rather ghost you than actually just say no. And then the S in DIMES is skepticism. And skepticism is present when your client or prospect doubts a feature or benefit that you've described, and they just doubt it. So I have a process for all of those, but I wanted to present that to you as a framework and get your feedback.
My thoughts on how you just went through. I mean, yeah, that happens all the time. Every salesperson will experience, if not 1 or 2, all of those during a sales process. Whenever I hear an objection, DIMES underneath it, I'll just put objection up top of it. You just got to ask another question like, why is that important? Or, don't take it at face value, because the first objection is never the real objection. There's always levels deeper. So never just take the first one. If they're unhappy with a feature or they want a feature you have, don't say, okay, yeah, well, I don't think it's in development. It's why. What are you trying to get to? What benefit will this feature give you? And then they might say something and, oh, well, we have something that will help in this area. So you can go down that path. Just ask more questions. That's my best advice. But is that how you tackle these things?
Definitely. Questions are the paddles for your conversation's canoe. They're the guardrails for the conversation. They're the way you guide conversations. As you were giving me your answer, I thought of a couple things that I often say. Number one, objections are often an empty suit. Like when you ask questions about it, the objection disappears.
Yeah.
Number two, I find, and one of the reasons I name the specific and generic objections is it often helps to just name it. Hey, I think we have a misunderstanding here. May I ask you some questions about that? Hey, I think there's a feature that you would like that we don't offer. That's a drawback. Would you say that's a drawback? And they say yes. May I ask you about that? And so absolutely asking questions, getting under multiple levels is really crucial. I also, though, the third point I want to make is that I think objections are a normal and healthy part of a sales process, and that a confident salesperson who has a process, you have a process, as do I, as outlined in my book. If you are confident about it, then when someone voices skepticism, you simply say, you can say, you sound skeptical. And then I have a 7-step process for what to do when someone voices skepticism. The first is to just get agreement that they're skeptical. I'm remembering a conversation I had recently where the first time I said to this prospect, Peter, was, you sound skeptical. And he said, no, I'm not skeptical. It's just that you seem like you're hiding something. And I said, that sounds like skepticism. And then he finally said, well, isn't it healthy to be skeptical? As if being skeptical was a bad thing. And I said, it's absolutely healthy. I want you to be skeptical. I want to be transparent. It's a healthy part of making a decision that's going to impact you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed it on the head. You know, you hit the nail so hard on the head, you bent it. I have nothing to add to that.
You mentioned that you might schedule 45 minutes, schedule an hour meeting. 45 minutes is the demo. 15 minutes is the value calculator and going through the exercise. I'm wondering why that wouldn't necessarily be flipped, that you actually either spend very little time with the demo or even start a little bit into your value calculator, then kind of weave in the demo. Does that ever happen as well?
I have not. Can it and should it? The answer is yes, Ivan, but getting salespeople to change their behavior, and they've been selling this way for over 20 years. Just getting them to do 15 minutes at the end is an unbearable feat. Okay. So trying to do it the other way, I'm just slowly chopping at the tree. Eventually it should be 50-50, you know. But yeah, I mean, just getting them to change the way they present and take that 15 minutes and sell a little differently than the way they're used to selling is a challenge enough. But yes, you hit the nail on the head. They want the outcome. The demo should just be to get you comfortable that you could deliver the outcome. It's just like, okay, I see you have it and it works. The outcome is what they're focused on. So you're right, it should be flipped, but I'm not going to tackle that that monster quite yet.
Most of my conversations, I start with, here's what I put forth as things to accomplish. But before we start going down that road, I'd like to understand what you'd like to accomplish. And the key is something I call Mississippi. And it's waiting 1, 2, 3, or 4 Mississippi, talking in your own head before the other person answers. What would you like to accomplish? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, to give them the opportunity to kind of think about it. And then my client or my prospect will list off what it is that's important to them. It may be that they go with the quick agenda that I laid out, but in most cases they have a twist to it. And then from there, I'm using open-ended questions to help them understand what their needs are and also what their objections are. I'll often say objectives and objections as kind of the framework for the conversations to help people get what they need. So what are your objectives? Okay, here's my solution. What are your objections to that solution? Which I think actually could help your clients get ghosted less, and the salespeople that you talk to, is to simply come out and ask, what are your objections? Or even be so bold to say, okay, usually most of the time it ends in a no decision. How likely do you think it is, Mr. Prospect or Mrs. Prospect or Ms. Prospect, that there won't be a decision here, that you're likely in a couple of weeks to get my email and not want to return it because your organization doesn't make a decision? I call that an assessor question, is how likely is X to happen? And I want to throw that idea by you. Have you ever recommended people be so direct to say, how likely is that there's not going to be a decision in your organization?
I love it. I love the idea of calling out the elephant in the room. So many people it's easy to overcomplicate things. Just keep it simple. I think that's one of the advantages, to go back to the calculator. You could build a calculator that's terrible and overcomplicated, and that's how most of them are. Usually people that build these calculators aren't even in sales. It's who knows Excel the best or the smartest person in the room, and then they'll make it, their minds don't think like salespeople. Like I said, I was terrible at math. I'm terrible. I'm still terrible at math now. And now I own a company built around math. But I do think what I was once embarrassed about, that I think, I wasn't the smartest person. My English isn't the best. I'm the worst speller in the world. My wife laughs at me when she reads the grocery list because I misspell common things that we buy every week. My mind is very simple. So when I build these calculators for prospects, I build it very simple, very logical, simple. I'm not trying to get fancy or too cute. And it makes it an easier conversation. You know what the objection is? It's just easier to just let it out of the box and not dance around it. We all see it. We all know it's possible, but I love it, Ivan. I mean, the simpler you can get and calling those things out, it's only going to help build rapport, and it's refreshing to the prospect as well. I mean, they'll say, you know what? Our CEO doesn't like soft dollar. We just had a failed project 2 weeks ago. Everybody's kind of on eggshells. 2 people just left. I mean, they'll tell you some things behind the scenes by just asking. So I love the idea. And I'm actually going to start using that one. I've never come out and asked that, but I will say, what are the odds on this? If you need A, B, and C, even if I give you those, why will this end in a no decision? And I love it.
The 2 questions that I find help assess how likely is and how comfortable are you? So how likely is your organization to embrace this technology? How comfortable are you advocating for the product that I've given you? How enthusiastic are you about the product? Where do you see this dying on the vine? Yes. Right? How many people need to say okay to making this happen? Who is the most influential person? And how can I arm you with the information that you need to be effective? Yeah. How effective do you want to be? Do you want this to happen? Do you see how? So these are mostly open-ended questions, which I preach, what and how questions, because what and how questions accomplish something that closed-ended questions don't. But there is a time and a place for closed-ended questions. It's just that what I've observed in our society, 80 to 90% of the questions that people ask are closed-ended, and closed-ended questions make a point, they get agreement, but what they usually do is lose control over a conversation and don't really get you the information about motivations, needs, and wants. This is the stuff that I write and talk about all the time, is when to use an open-ended question, when to use a closed-ended question. That's where I usually have people start when I'm doing coaching on conversations, is to have a mastery over which type of question they're asking. It's real basic, and I find most people don't know how to do it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you on that.
I even play a game, I call it the open-ended question rodeo, where I ask, how in a rodeo, I think you have to stay on the bull for 6 seconds before you even get a store. Yeah. I role play a scenario, and the only thing they can do to answer is with an open-ended question. People can't stay on the bull. Maybe they get 1 or 2 open-ended questions, but they're just not comfortable doing it, which is a weird thing. But again, I don't think it's created and taught or learned in our society. And mostly people learn about conversations by one of 2 ways: trial and error or role models. Well, role models aren't always good. In fact, most of the role models we have learned also by trial and error. They learn from the people around them. And so we have all these people running around having conversations based on trial and error. And some people are good and gifted, and some people are not good, don't have the talent. And so what I always try to bring in my channel, in my podcast, in my book, is helping people with the tools and skills they need to be better and more effective in their conversations, because ultimately our relationships are made up of conversations. Conversations are the basic unit. And if we have better conversations, we have better relationships, and we're more effective in business. I'm going to get off my soapbox now to allow you to make a closing statement. What else would you like to put into this conversation that we haven't covered? Anything. Could be anything.
Well, first, before I get to that, I want to ask you a question, Ivan. So if you were to start a new school, the conversation school, what are 3 main courses everybody has to take to graduate? What would be the 3 main courses in your conversation school?
First of all, I am going to answer that in a couple of ways. So one, that is my mission, is to found a school called Conversations Academy.
Okay.
And down the road, Conversations University, like an actual 4-year university where conversations are the focus. But the answer is 3 things. I think to say 3 classes. One, I think people need to know how to build rapport and build rapport systematically, methodically, and consistently. And so there's tools, tips, and techniques in order to do that, because without rapport, it's really hard to have the basis for an effective conversation if you don't like and trust the other person. So the first is rapport. The second is using questions skillfully, not just using questions, but using them with skill. And the third is listening. My belief is that if you build rapport, use questions skillfully, and listen, you're a lot better off than the person that can spout off features and benefits and technicalities and product knowledge, because you have the trust and confidence of somebody. You're using questions to really understand how you can support their needs. And then you're actually listening. You talked a few minutes ago about a 50-50. More and more, the more I do this, I find that really it's a 70-30. But a 70-30 is not me talking 70% of the time. It's my client or my prospect talking 70% of the time. So those are the 3 classes: rapport, questions, and listening.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. Anything? All right. So back to your question for me, anything I want your viewers to get out of this?
Yeah.
If you're watching this or listening to it and you're a salesperson or a sales leader, it's just a different way of selling. It's not sales training by any means. We know companies have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales trainings just so the reps could forget it within a month. We're not teaching you how to reverse questions or ask this or handle that objection or so many things. It's literally, if your reps could read, they can go through a calculator and it just changes the conversation. So it's not like we just dumped $200,000 in the Sandler training and nobody's using it or anything like that. But you have to be comfortable with change. This is a different way of selling. Not necessarily a hard way. It's just different conversation. So, if you're stuck in your way and you think I'm good, I don't need to change, then value selling is probably not for you. But if you realize things are changing out there, the economy's down, budgets are tighter, you're getting more no decisions, your leads are going down, and you have to make the most of what you got to talk about what they care about. And like you mentioned earlier, companies care about making money and saving money. That is really it. And their core company objectives. So I'm not going to try to sell you or anything. Follow me on LinkedIn. If you like my posts and you like my ideas, you could reach out. I'm here to answer any questions. But other than that, I've really enjoyed the time, Ivan. It was great talking with you.
It's great talking with you. I definitely encourage people to follow you on LinkedIn. Your videos, the video today was hysterical. And there is something very potent in the simplicity of your message. So in my closing statement is what you're doing, I think, is very important. And again, your message is simple, but it's powerful. And I'm just delighted to be in conversation and collaboration with you. To the person listening to my words right now, that's not you or me, I invite you to join the conversation. I'm also building a community of conversation leaders. It's a community of like-minded professionals who appreciate the importance of conversations, who want to lead others in significant and meaningful conversations. They want to get involved and teach classes. Partly, Michael, I think of this as a class in value selling. That's how I think about it for the Future Conversations Academy. And then also to the audience out there, my door is open. If I can be of service to you, either coaching, speaking, or training in your organization, I'd love to be in conversation with you. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or contact me by email at ivan@conversations.biz. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please do so and visit my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@conversationleaders. With that, Michael Farber, and I love saying that, Michael Farber and everyone out there, thank you for being a part of this conversation about conversations.